So this happened to me about 6 months ago, and I'm still processing it honestly. I keep getting messages asking for updates, so here's the full story of how I went from being invisible at work to completely flipping the script on my toxic managers. Buckle up because this gets wild. I'm 32 and I work in tech consulting. Well, worked, things are different now, but let me back up and give you the full picture of what went down. I was a systems strategy consultant at this mid-tier firm called Orion Analytics. Nothing too fancy, but we did decent work for decent clients. The company had maybe 60 employees, and honestly, it felt like one of those places where if you kept your head down and did good work, you'd eventually get recognized. Spoiler alert, that's not how it works. Here's the thing, I'd been there for 3 years and I was good at what I did. Like really good. I had this knack for seeing patterns in data that other people missed, and I could build systems that actually worked in the real world, not just on paper. But somehow I was always the one doing the heavy lifting while other people got the credit. Classic story, right? My manager Logan was this guy in his early 40s who'd been at the company for like 7 years. He had this way of making everything sound like it was his idea, even when you literally watched him hear it for the first time. And then there was Vanessa, who was technically at the same level as me but somehow always got invited to the important meetings while I stayed behind to handle the technical details. And then came the project. This is where everything changed. Capital was this massive investment firm that we'd been trying to land as a client for months. We're talking about a $7.9 million contract here, the kind of deal that could literally make or break a company like ours. Our CEO, Grant Weber, was practically salivating over this opportunity. He kept talking about how landing would put us in the big leagues. So when Logan called me into his office and told me I was being assigned to the project, I was actually excited. Finally, I thought, a chance to show what I could really do. Just do some preliminary research, he said, barely looking up from his computer. See what you can find about their current systems, maybe put together some basic analysis. Just gather some data, just do some basic analysis, right? So I dove in, and when I say dove in, I mean I went full obsessive mode. For 4 months straight, I was living and breathing this project. I'm talking 14-hour days, working weekends, staying up until 2 in the morning because I'd had another breakthrough. I didn't just analyze their current systems, I dissected them. I found inefficiencies they probably didn't even know they had. I built predictive models that could forecast their data needs for the next 5 years. I created solutions that could literally save them millions of dollars annually while improving their security and efficiency. And the deeper I got into it, the more I realized this wasn't preliminary research anymore. This was the entire strategy. I was building the whole presentation, the complete solution, everything they would need to not just win the contract, but to actually deliver on it. But here's what was driving me crazy. Logan kept treating it like I was just doing grunt work, like I was his personal research assistant or something. He'd pop by my desk every few days and ask for updates on the data gathering. Data gathering? I was literally redesigning their entire infrastructure, and he called it data gathering. And don't even get me started on Vanessa. This woman contributed absolutely nothing to the project, and I mean nothing, but she kept getting pulled into meetings about our project, like she'd done anything besides occasionally swing by my desk to ask how things were going. I started keeping detailed notes of everything I was doing, every breakthrough, every solution I developed. Call it paranoia, but something felt off about the whole situation. Logan was being weirdly secretive about the project timeline, and Vanessa kept making these comments about how excited she was to present our findings. But the real kicker came 3 days before the big presentation to his executive team. I'm at my desk, putting the finishing touches on what I genuinely believed was the best work of my career, when Logan appears. I need your laptop, he says, not even sitting down. I look up at him, confused. What do you mean? Your laptop, I need it for the presentation prep. I'm thinking, okay, maybe he wants to review everything one more time. Maybe we're finally going to talk about how I'm going to present this work that I've poured my soul into for 4 months. So I close my laptop and hand it over, and then Logan drops the bomb. You're not experienced enough for this level of client interaction, he says, like he's doing me some kind of favor. Vanessa and I will handle the presentation. You'll support from the background, of course. I literally stood there with my mouth open. 4 months of my life. 4 months of 14-hour days, sleepless nights, breakthrough moments, and creative solutions that I was genuinely proud of. And they were just going to walk into that conference room and present it like it was theirs. But here's the thing about me, I might look like someone who'll just roll over and take it, but I've learned a few things in this industry. And one of those things is, always have a backup plan. Because 3 weeks earlier, when I started getting that weird feeling about how this was all going to play out, I made a decision that was about to change everything. So here's what I did 3 weeks before the presentation, and honestly, it still gives me chills thinking about how perfectly it worked out. I was working late one night again when something Logan said earlier that day finally clicked. He'd made this comment about how the team would be presenting to, and when I asked what he meant by the team, he got all vague and weird about it. That's when I knew for sure that I was being set up to be the invisible person behind the work. Now let me explain something technical here because this is important to the story. The entire solution I'd built for revolved around this custom encryption and data verification system. It wasn't just some off-the-shelf software. I had literally coded a 9-layer security protocol that was specifically tailored to their infrastructure. This thing was beautiful. It would prevent data loss, ensure perfect backup integrity, and do it all while being completely seamless for their users. But here's the crucial part. This encryption sequence was the heart of everything. Without it, all the other recommendations were just suggestions, nice ideas, but nothing that would actually work in practice. The whole system would fall apart. And that night, sitting in the empty office with just the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic, I made a decision that would change my entire career trajectory. I removed the encryption sequence from the presentation. Not just the code itself, I removed all detailed explanations of how the security protocol worked. I took out the technical specifications, the implementation timeline, the cost projections for that component, everything. I left just enough information to show that there was a security solution, but not enough for anyone to actually understand or implement it. Then I saved everything to my personal drive and removed it from the company servers. Was I being petty? Maybe, but I told myself it was for proprietary protection. What if someone had decided to take our ideas and implement them in-house? What if they shopped our solution around to other consulting firms? I was protecting the company's intellectual property, right? Okay, fine, that's what I told myself. In reality, it was my insurance policy, and I'm not even sorry about it. The presentation day arrives, and I'm sitting at my desk, watching Logan and Vanessa walk into that glass conference room like they own the place. Logan's carrying a portfolio filled with my research, my analysis, my solutions. Vanessa's got her laptop and this confident smile that made me want to throw something. The team was impressive. Their CEO, a couple of VPs, and most importantly, their chief IT director. I'd researched all of them extensively and was the one I was most worried about. She had this reputation for asking the hard technical questions that would expose anyone who didn't really understand the material. From my desk, I could see into the conference room through the glass walls. Logan was doing his usual smooth-talking routine, gesturing at charts and graphs that I'd created. Vanessa was nodding along, chiming in with surface-level observations that sounded impressive if you didn't know the subject matter. For the first hour, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Logan was in his element, selling the vision, talking about efficiency gains and cost savings. I could see the team nodding, taking notes, looking engaged. But then raised her hand. Even from across the office, I could see Logan's confidence falter slightly. Said something, I couldn't hear it, but I could read her body language. She was leaning forward, pointing at something on the screen, and her expression was skeptical. Logan looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at Logan. There was this moment of awkward silence that I could practically feel from 50 feet away. Then stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She started writing something technical diagrams from what I could see. She was asking about the implementation details, the nuts and bolts of how this beautiful system I designed would actually work in practice. And that's when Logan started to sweat. I watched him flip through the portfolio, clearly looking for information that wasn't there. Vanessa was doing the same thing with her laptop, clicking through slides, and I could see the panic starting to set in. The team was getting restless, was still at the whiteboard, waiting for an answer to what was probably a very basic technical question about the security protocol. The CEO was checking his phone. The VPs were exchanging glances. This went on for maybe 10 minutes, 10 beautiful, vindicating minutes of watching Logan and Vanessa realize that they were completely out of their depth. They had memorized the talking points, but they had no idea how any of it actually worked. Finally, put down the marker and said something that made Logan's face go completely pale. From his body language, I could tell she'd asked the question I'd been waiting for her to ask. How does the system prevent data loss during the encryption process? It was the most critical question, the one that would expose the giant gap in their presentation, and Logan had absolutely no idea how to answer it. That's when he looked directly at me through the glass wall. Our eyes met across the office, and I saw something in his expression that I'd never seen before: desperation, fear, the sudden realization that his little power play was about to blow up in his face. He said something to the team, then walked out of the conference room and straight to my desk. He said, trying to keep his voice casual even though I could see him sweating, Could you join us for a moment? They have some technical questions. I looked at him for a long moment. This was it. This was the moment everything would change. Of course, I said, saving my work and closing my laptop. I'd be happy to help. As I walked toward that conference room, I felt this incredible calm wash over me. For 4 months, I'd been invisible. For 4 months, my work had been treated like it didn't matter. But now they needed me, and I was about to show them exactly what that meant. Walking into that conference room felt like the longest 30 seconds of my entire career. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but for the first time in months, it wasn't because I was being dismissed or overlooked. They needed me, and we all knew it. The team was sitting around this massive glass table, and you could cut the tension with a knife. Was still standing by the whiteboard, marker in hand, with this expression that clearly said, "I'm waiting for a real answer." The CEO looked annoyed, checking his watch like he had better places to be. The VPs were exchanging those looks that executives give each other when a meeting is going off the rails. And then there were Logan and Vanessa, both trying to look confident while clearly freaking out internally. Logan cleared his throat as I entered. "Everyone, this is Grant, one of our team members who helped gather some of the technical data for this project." Helped gather some of the technical data? Are you kidding me? But completely ignored Logan's introduction. She looked directly at me and said, "Can you explain the mechanism that prevents data loss during the encryption and verification process?" Now, this was the moment of truth. I could have played along with Logan's narrative, been the good little support person, answered the question quietly and let them take the credit. That's probably what the old me would have done. Instead, I walked past the chairs Logan had clearly expected me to stand behind, pulled out the chair at the head of the table, not beside it, and sat down. The power shift was immediate and obvious to everyone in the room. "Absolutely," I said, looking straight in the eye. "But first, let me give you some context about what we're actually proposing here, because I think there might be some confusion about the scope and complexity of this solution." I could see Logan's jaw clench, but he couldn't exactly tell me to stop talking in front of the client. I turned to the whiteboard and started drawing. What you're looking at isn't just a security upgrade, it's a complete reimagining of how your data infrastructure handles sensitive information. The system I've designed uses a 9-layer verification protocol that's specifically tailored to your current architecture. And then I just took over. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through every single component of the system. I explained the custom encryption algorithms, the backup redundancy protocols, the user authentication hierarchies. I answered every question they threw at me, and they threw a lot of them. Was particularly thorough. She asked about implementation timelines, potential conflicts with their existing systems, scalability concerns, cost projections for different phases of the rollout. Every single question I had an answer, a detailed, well-researched, completely accurate answer. Because it was my system, I had built every piece of it from the ground up. The CEO started leaning forward, asking his own questions. The VPs put away their phones and started taking actual notes. And Logan and Vanessa, they just sat there, realizing that they were completely irrelevant to this conversation. But the best part, the absolute best part, was when asked, "What's your background with this type of implementation?" I didn't hesitate. I've been developing custom security protocols for 3 years, with a focus on financial sector applications. This particular system incorporates lessons learned from similar projects I've completed for mid-tier investment firms, but it's specifically designed around the unique challenges that faces with your current data volume and compliance requirements. Then she asked the question that made my heart race, "And what's your role in the implementation process?" Before Logan could jump in with some nonsense about team coordination, I said, "I designed the entire system, so I'd be the natural choice to oversee the technical implementation and serve as your primary point of contact for any modifications or troubleshooting." The silence that followed was deafening. Looked at Logan, then at me, then back at Logan. "I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused. Why wasn't leading this presentation from the beginning?" This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. I could have been diplomatic. I could have made some excuse about team dynamics or company protocol. But you know what? I was done being diplomatic. "Because I wasn't invited," I said simply. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just gone off. His eyebrows shot up. The CEO actually looked shocked. One of the VPs literally said, "I'm sorry, what?" Logan's face went through about 5 different shades of red. "Well, we have different team members handle different aspects of client relations, and the person who designed your entire solution wasn't invited to present it?" Interrupted, and her tone made it clear exactly what she thought about that. Logan started fumbling for words but had already moved on. She turned back to me and said, "Can you walk us through the implementation timeline one more time? Specifically, I want to understand the resource requirements for the first phase." For the next 20 minutes, it was basically just me and the team having a technical discussion while Logan and Vanessa sat there like furniture. I pulled up documents on my phone, sketched out diagrams, answered follow-up questions about everything from server requirements to staff training protocols. By the time we wrapped up, was smiling, actually smiling for the first time since I'd entered the room. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," she said. "The level of customization, the attention to our specific needs, the clear implementation pathway, this is impressive work." She paused, looked around the room, and then said the words that changed everything. "That changes now." She was looking directly at Logan when she said it, and her meaning was crystal clear. The dynamic that had kept me invisible for 4 months, that was over. As the meeting ended and the team filed out, stopped by my chair, "Do you have a business card? I'd like to continue our technical discussions directly." I handed her my card and she smiled again. "Excellent, I'll be in touch very soon." After they left, I sat there for a moment, still processing what had just happened. Logan and Vanessa were packing up their materials in silence, avoiding eye contact with me. But I knew this was just the beginning. Because if there's one thing I've learned about corporate dynamics, it's that when you upset the power structure this dramatically, there are always consequences. I just had no idea how big those consequences were going to be. You guys, what happened next was like something out of a corporate thriller movie. I'm not even exaggerating. I barely had time to get back to my desk before my phone started buzzing with a calendar notification. "Meeting with HR and Grant Weber, Conference Room B, 3:00 p.m. It was already 2:45. My stomach dropped. Grant Weber was our CEO, and he did not get involved in day-to-day project stuff unless something was seriously wrong. This was happening fast, too fast for it to be anything good. I grabbed my laptop and headed to Conference Room B, which was the formal meeting room they used for serious discussions. You know, the one with the intimidating leather chairs and the giant conference table that made you feel like you were on trial. When I walked in, Logan was already there, sitting across from Grant and our HR director, Susan Martinez. Logan wouldn't make eye contact with me, which honestly told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation had started. "Please sit down," Grant said, and his tone was completely unreadable. Susan opened a folder, never a good sign when HR opens a folder, and said, "We need to discuss what happened in today's client meeting." Before I could say anything, Logan jumped in. "I want to state for the record that deliberately sabotaged the presentation by withholding critical information from the team." Sabotage, he actually used the word sabotage. "That's a serious accusation, Logan," Grant said, looking between us. "Can you be more specific?" Logan leaned forward, getting into full victim mode. For weeks, has been working on technical components of the project. When it came time to prepare the presentation materials, she failed to include crucial details about the security protocol. This put the entire team in an embarrassing position in front of a major client. I sat there listening to this absolute fiction, feeling my blood pressure rise with every word. Susan said, "What's your response to these allegations?" This was it. I could either play defense and try to explain myself, or I could go on offense with the truth. I chose offense. "I'd like to present some documentation," I said, pulling out my laptop. "I have emails, project notes, and draft versions that I think will clarify the actual timeline and ownership of this work." For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through everything. Every email where Logan had assigned me preliminary research, every meeting invitation that I hadn't received, every draft of the presentation that had my name on the file properties but Logan's name on the title slide. The evidence was overwhelming, and I could see Grant's expression changing as I presented it. "So let me make sure I understand," Grant said slowly. "Logan, you assigned to do what you characterized as preliminary research, but she actually developed the entire technical solution." "Well, yes, but..." "And then you excluded her from the presentation planning and the client meeting itself." "She's not experienced enough for that level of..." "But when the client asked technical questions that you couldn't answer, you called her in to save the presentation." Logan was turning red again. I wouldn't characterize it as. Grant held up his hand to stop him. "Logan, I think we need to have a separate conversation about project management and team leadership. Susan, can you set that up for tomorrow morning?" Then he turned to me. "Thank you for the documentation. This has been very illuminating." But just as I thought the meeting was wrapping up, Susan's phone buzzed. She looked at it, frowned, and then showed the screen to Grant. "It's an email from," she said. "They want to discuss contract terms." Grant read the email and his eyebrows shot up. They want to schedule a follow-up meeting tomorrow, and they're specifically requesting that be the primary point of contact for all technical discussions. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was doing victory laps. There's more, Grant continued, still reading. They're asking for to be formally designated as the project lead, and they want her to handle quarterly progress briefings directly with their executive team. Logan looked like he'd been slapped, but I'm the account manager. Logan, I think you need to focus on that conversation with Susan tomorrow, Grant said firmly. After Logan left practically storming out, Grant asked me to stay behind. I'm going to be direct with you. What happened today was unusual, but the client response has been overwhelmingly positive. They're ready to move forward with the contract, but they have some specific requirements about how the project is managed. He pulled out his phone and read from another email. They want you listed as the official project lead. They want direct reporting lines between you and their IT director. And here's the interesting part. They've included a clause that if we don't support you adequately in this role, they reserve the right to recruit you directly. Wait, what? I'm sorry, what did you just say? Grant smiled for the first time in the meeting. Is so impressed with your work that they're essentially threatening to poach you if we don't treat you properly. I've been in this business for 15 years, and I've never seen a client make that kind of demand. My head was spinning. What does this mean for my role here? It means you're getting promoted. Effective immediately, you're our new lead technical consultant. You'll report directly to me instead of through Logan, and there's a performance bonus tied to the successful completion of the project. I sat there staring at him, trying to process what had just happened. 12 hours ago, I was invisible. Now I was getting promoted and had a major client basically threatening to steal me if the company didn't treat me right. There's just one thing, Grant continued. How did you know to position yourself this way? Because this level of strategic thinking, it's impressive. I thought about how to answer that. How do you explain that sometimes you just get tired of being invisible? How do you tell your CEO that you made a calculated gamble that could have backfired spectacularly? I believed in the work, I said finally, and I believed that if given the chance, I could prove its value. Grant nodded slowly. Well, you've certainly done that. The question now is, what do you want to do with this opportunity? And that's when I realized that everything was about to change. Not just my job, not just my title, but my entire career trajectory. The invisible consultant was about to become very, very visible. So the next morning, I walked into work feeling like I was in some alternate universe. I had a new title, a new reporting structure, and apparently a client who was ready to go to war for me. But you know what they say about corporate politics? When you win big, the real games are just beginning. Grant called me into his office first thing to discuss contract terms. And guys, when I saw what they were asking for, I literally had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. First, they wanted me formally listed as the project lead on all documentation and communications. Not team member, not technical consultant, project lead. Second, they wanted me to handle quarterly briefings directly with their C-suite. We're talking about presenting to executives who manage billions of dollars in assets. No intermediaries, no Logan lurking in the background trying to take credit. But the third condition, that was the nuclear option. If Orion Analytics failed to adequately support me in this role, or if there were any attempts to sideline me or reassign the project, reserved the right to terminate the contract and offer me a direct employment opportunity. They basically turned me into untouchable. Our legal team is concerned about this, Grant admitted, showing me the contract. They're saying it sets a dangerous precedent for client interference in our internal management decisions. I could practically hear the panic in the legal department. They were probably imagining every client demanding veto power over our staffing decisions. What do you think? Grant asked. Honestly, I was still processing the fact that a major client valued my work enough to essentially threaten my company on my behalf, but I also knew this was a pivotal moment. How I responded would set the tone for my entire future at Orion. I think, I said carefully, that recognizes the value of consistency and expertise in project leadership. They've invested significant time in understanding our proposed solution, and they want to ensure that the person who developed it is the one implementing it. Grant nodded slowly, and if we push back on these terms, then we lose a $7.9 million contract because we're too proud to let our most qualified person lead the project they designed. He was quiet for a long moment, then picked up his phone. Susan, can you get our legal team in here? We need to finalize the contract terms. The next few hours were absolutely surreal. I sat in meeting after meeting while lawyers and executives debated my career like I was a free agent in professional sports. The legal team kept using phrases like unprecedented client involvement and dangerous precedent, while Grant kept pointing to the dollar amount and asking if they had a better solution. Finally, around noon, Grant made the call. We're accepting their terms, all of them. And just like that, my professional life completely transformed. By the end of that week, I had a new office, an actual office with a door and everything, not just a desk in the open floor plan. I had a direct line to Grant, a budget for hiring additional team members, and a performance bonus that was tied directly to the project's success. But the real victory came during the next company-wide meeting. Every month, Orion held these all-hands meetings where Grant would update everyone on new contracts, project statuses, and company news. Usually, I sat in the back and listened while other people got recognized for work I'd contributed to. This time was different. I'm pleased to announce that we've signed the largest contract in Orion's history, Grant began, and the room buzzed with excitement. $7.9 million with capital for a comprehensive systems overhaul that will position them as a leader in data security and efficiency. He paused, looking directly at me. This project was developed and will be led by our newly promoted lead technical consultant, Grant. The applause was polite but confused. Half the room was looking around trying to figure out who I was. The other half, including Logan and Vanessa, were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed anger. We'll be building a dedicated implementation team and will report directly to me on this project. Her innovative approach to custom security protocols is exactly the kind of technical leadership that sets Orion apart from our competitors. After the meeting, the reactions were interesting. Some colleagues came up to congratulate me, though you could tell they were still processing the dramatic shift. Others, particularly people in Logan's circle, suddenly found reasons to avoid eye contact. But Logan was reassigned to what Grant diplomatically called a strategic support role, which everyone knew was corporate speak for "we're managing you out." Vanessa just sort of faded into irrelevance. She stayed with the company, but she never got invited to the important meetings again. The best part, though, was building my new team. I had the authority to recruit engineers and analysts who, like me, had been overlooked despite their talent. Within a month, I had assembled this incredible group of people who were hungry to prove themselves. And prove themselves they did. We delivered the first phase of the project 2 weeks ahead of schedule and came in 8% under budget, was absolutely thrilled, and she started recommending us to other firms in her network. My phone started ringing with recruiters asking if I was interested in other opportunities. Other companies began reaching out, specifically requesting me for their projects. But you know what the most satisfying moment was? About 3 months after everything went down, I was in the break room getting coffee when I overheard 2 junior analysts talking. "Did you hear that is bringing in 3 more companies to bid on their next project?" "Yeah, but they specifically requested that Grant be involved in the evaluation process. Apparently, she's becoming kind of a legend in the industry." A legend, me, the woman who 6 months earlier couldn't get invited to present her own work. And that's when I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at the people who wronged you. Sometimes it's becoming so successful that their opinion of you becomes completely irrelevant. But this story isn't over yet, because the real transformation was still coming. Later that week, I sent out an internal memo, ostensibly about the project kickoff. But buried within it in clear, unambiguous language was a new internal policy I was implementing with Grant's full backing. Moving forward, all project leads and significant contributors will be formally acknowledged and credited in all client-facing documentation and internal communications. There will also be a mandatory audit of every project for proper credit assignment. It was a quiet declaration of war on the Logan Millers and Vanessa of the world. I promised myself, and effectively the company, that I would audit every project for proper credit. The days of invisible labor were over. The power had shifted, and I was holding the reins. The memo I sent out outlining the new policy for project acknowledgement and mandatory audits hit Orion Analytics like a silent internal earthquake. The rumblings were subtle at first, just whispers in the hallways, curious glances. But soon the impact was undeniable. My direct report to Grant Weber wasn't just a title, it was a pipeline straight to the CEO, giving me the authority to cut through red tape and, more importantly, to enforce the new rules. The days of hidden labor and stolen credit were rapidly drawing to a close. Within half a year, the transformation was staggering. My new role as lead technical consultant for the account wasn't just about managing a single client, it became a blueprint for how projects should be run. I didn't just inherit a team, I actively built one. I sought out engineers and analysts who, like me, had been consistently overlooked, whose brilliance was buried under layers of corporate politics or dismissed as lacking experience by people like Logan. We were the misfits, the underdogs, the ones who truly cared about the code and the client, not just the climb. Our team operated with a level of transparency and integrity that was, frankly, revolutionary for Orion. We held open-door sessions, shared knowledge freely, and celebrated individual contributions loudly. The morale among us was through the roof. We weren't just colleagues, we were a unit, a force for good in a company that desperately needed it, and the results spoke for themselves. We delivered the first phase of the project a full 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Not only that, but our optimizations made it 8% more cost-effective than even our most optimistic projections. Was predictably thrilled, she sent glowing emails to Grant Weber praising my leadership and my team's efficiency. The success became a shining beacon and undeniable proof of concept. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, other companies began reaching out to Orion Analytics, but their inquiries weren't generic, they were specific. "We've heard about the project," they'd say. "We want the team that handled that, we want Grant." I no longer stayed quiet in meetings. My voice, once silenced, now carried weight. When a junior developer presented an innovative idea, I didn't let a manager sweep in and take credit. I made sure that developer got the spotlight, the praise, the recognition they deserved. I mentored junior staff, sharing not just technical knowledge but also the unspoken rules of navigating corporate environments, teaching them how to advocate for themselves, how to document their contributions, how to protect their work. I saw the spark in their eyes, the blossoming confidence, and knew I was doing something truly meaningful. As for Logan, the corporate landscape shifted beneath his feet. With my direct line to Grant and the undeniable success of the project, his influence waned dramatically. He was quietly reassigned to a vague, strategic support role, a corporate euphemism for being put out to pasture. He was no longer on any major client accounts, his ability to steal credit severely curtailed by the new auditing policy. Vanessa, too, drifted into irrelevance, her superficial charm proving useless without someone else's work to attach it to. They became cautionary tales, fading echoes of a bygone era. It was incredible to think that one calculated choice, to withhold a critical piece of information, to bet on myself when no one else would, had changed everything. Not out of spite, not out of a desire for petty revenge, but out of a deep-seated need for survival and ultimately for justice. Sometimes you don't need to burn bridges. You don't need to engage in destructive battles. You just need to be smart, to understand where the real power lies, and then subtly but firmly reroute the power. And when you do, it doesn't just change your path, it can change the entire landscape for everyone who follows.